when you think they're going to get all sexy and, show those moves, he instead pulls out like a front head lock takedown.
Snapmare. Okay, Juan loved this scene because he did a snapmare, all right?
Yes, also that. But it's just
Don't even lie, Juan. You know it's true.
Yep. What's more fun than a wrestling fan who drives a pump it and dump it sewage truck and sucks up the sweet air of World Championship Wrestling glory at night? Two wrestling fans, Gordie and Sean. Whether you like wrestling or hate wrestling, when it comes to the big screen, when it comes to the movie theater experience, a lot of wrestlers have made that transition. I mean, we got to talk about John Cena, Dwayne Johnson, even Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Triple H did a little something there. But what if you brought the big screen to a specific company in the year 2000 with World Championship Wrestling, which self-produced a movie called Ready to Rumble, starring David Arquette, which has developed a lot of infamous reputation in the world of professional wrestling. And whether you like wrestling or not, I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation on another episode of A Cast of the Past, with a brand new available episode every single Sunday with yours truly from Puerto Rico. My name is Juan Velez, and this is my birthday gift because my birthday is on September 13th. So celebrating just beforehand, I told these two fine gentlemen, this is it. This is my birthday gift, for better or worse. So introducing first from Boston, Massachusetts, Mr. Ryan Mcnulty. Ryan, had you watched this movie before we did it for this episode?
Indeed, I have. In fact, this was the first movie I ever saw on DVD.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I mean, hey,
it has
you
the
can only go down
honor.
from there.
Yeah.
And then I'm scared to introduce this next person. Luckily, this is recorded so we can censor if need be. From London, Ontario, we have Keith Hamilton. Now, Keith, what's your take on Ready to Rumble? And you can just go away with that.
Well, are you excited for some good old-fashioned wrestling fun? Because that's what this is. It's wrestling with a capital R-A-W.
Yeah, so for those that don't know...
W-R-A-W.
Oh, no.
Wrestling.
Keith, this is going to be a challenging experience for Keith, because, look, let's be real. This is not exactly a cinematic masterpiece. This is quite the painful movie to watch for most people out there.
It's a masterpiece in some ways.
In some ways, exactly, it could possibly be, but this movie came out in April 2000, and just for like a little quick context for the non-wrestling fans out there, in the 90s, we had something called the Monday Night War. So it was World Wrestling Federation, better known now as the WWE, and you had WCW, World Championship Wrestling. Especially between the years of 96 and 98, they were like neck and neck when it comes to the ratings war. And then towards the end of WCW, they actually went out of business in the year 2001, which makes this movie just very questionable because it came out in April 2000, and WCW ended in March 2001. And just to give you an idea of how much money they were just throwing out there, this movie had a budget of $24 million, which is not even like a big budget. I mean, it is your roster, right? It's like a lot of the wrestlers are part of that. It made half of that. It only made $12.5 million. So
I love that so much. I mean, hey, a lot of people lost a lot of money, and that sucks, but goddamn, so does this movie.
Ryan, when you see that, the fact that it already had a small enough budget and it made even less, does it surprise you a little bit, or is that kind of part of the course?
It surprises me a little bit just because this is, April 2000, and I remember seeing the trailer. It definitely seemed like it had a good advertisement behind it, because I do remember seeing that trailer all the time back when it came out. But 2000s we were still, maybe it was just past like really the height of like professional wrestling. I would have expected this to do a lot better, but I think at this point WCW seemed to be a little bit on the downswing by this point, if I'm not mistaken.
More than a little bit.
Yeah.
Not even low. Like they were just going down.
That might have been it. Like if it had come out maybe 2 years earlier, I think it would have done much, much better. because it was trying to really capitalize when wrestling was a big deal. And WWE was rocking and rolling at this point. It's just WCW was having a little bit more trouble.
Yeah, jokes aside, it's not that surprising that this was a bit of a flop, because if you take away the wrestling aspect of it, the movies that were coming out like this in the early 2000s were a dime a dozen. Like, the toilet humors, in some points literal in this movie, were just made mainstream by your American Pies, your
literally
scary
toilet
movies.
humor. Okay,
yeah,
so we got to emphasize
there's
that.
literal toilet humor in this movie, but all of the gags that this movie surrounds itself with, both in and out of wrestling, like, though there were 100 of those movies coming out around this time. So for this just to be another one of those that was on the lower end of good, then it's not shocking at all that it didn't make that much money.
The funny part about this is that I think when you talk about wrestling, movies about wrestling, most people go to The Wrestler, and for right reasons. It's an incredible movie. And the funny part is the actual story. Like, let's forget how these are done. The actual stories are kind of similar in some senses, because you have in both films a professional wrestler that gets their spotlight taken away from them, and it's kind of just like, hey, it's a fight to survive, trying to go back to normal style. Maybe they didn't exactly love their family or were the best parents. So if you watch The Wrestler, congratulations, you actually watched the proper wrestling movie, because this is the second one here. And it's worth pointing out that for me, I watched this movie when it first came out, because I mentioned in our other wrestling-related episodes, I grew up watching WCW, not WWF. So when I saw this, I'm like, sign me up. You get to go to the movies. You get to watch this. And I love me some cheese.
Did you
guys
wear
love
your
that?
Monday Nitro shirt to the movie theater?
I don't think I actually had one. I actually had WWF shirts, which made no sense. I think I had a Stone Cold shirt.
They must have just been easier to find. you know?
Yeah, probably. That's actually a really good point. So the opening statement here is, when you look at The Wrestler as a film was a dramatic film that I think was supposed to either create a connection with other wrestlers that went through negative times, but it was also supposed to like shed a light to the people that say wrestling's fake, right? And it's like, hey, it is choreographed, predetermined. What would you guys say was the real point, and if any, for Ready to Rumble?
Keith, you want to go?
I mean, if we're trying to find the point of it, I mean, I think it's really like, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. I've been watching wrestling since I was like 5 years old. The first match I ever watched was Farouk versus Mark Merrill for the Intercontinental title. I really started out with a banger. Yeah. But it's hard to look at this movie and try and find the point of it aside from just kind of feeling embarrassed about it as a wrestling fan, as lack of a better way to put it, because everything that you kind of get negatively stereotyped with as a wrestling fan, like when I made that joke at the beginning of the show, like, this is a movie about wrestling. It's the man-child who gets really into it and sits in front of their TV screaming at it every Monday night and doesn't believe it's fake and just buys into all the storylines. Like, they took every single cliche about a wrestling fan and then just turned it up. And as somebody that just like was fighting that for their entire lives, it's just like, it's like, well, this isn't what I want. This is embarrassing, really.
I definitely disagree. Now, is this movie some sort of cinematic masterpiece? No, but I actually think before the movie The Wrestler came out, and before we got, I haven't seen Fighting with My Family, but it's gotten very good reviews as well. Before either of those movies came out, I really think this was actually the best movie that heavily involved professional wrestling that was out there. And let me be clear, the bar was pretty low. I don't think Nacho Libre was a good representation of professional wrestling. I didn't really like that movie that much at all. I liked that if nothing else, this movie does give a slight peek into kind of the workings of wrestling. And I like that although the two main characters really want to believe in wrestling, the movie itself acknowledged that it's a show, acknowledged that it's a work. And I thought that was kind of a cool context behind, like, the screw job happening, where normally you see people, they're putting on the show, but all of a sudden, the owner of the company says, no, kick his ass, like, you're actually going to win
Sinclair,
tonight.
that evil bastard.
Yeah, Sinclair.
Yeah, Sinclair, who's not Eric Bischoff, but super Eric Bischoff.
Yeah, we're going to go into that. Like,
Yeah.
I think that far more interesting than the actual movie is everything around this movie. So let me give a little bit of context as far as the plot, which is maybe the easiest plot we've ever had to explain on this podcast, which is you have Jimmy King, who was at the top of the food chain, a completely made up character. So, like, with the exception of the entire roster, this is the only non-real wrestler played by Oliver Platt, so an actual actor. But the rest of the cast is like a full-blown wrestler. So you have Sting, Macho Man Randy Savage makes an appearance. You have Goldberg, Booker T, Kidman. Disco Inferno was in a freaking movie theater. I mean,
Unmasked
that is
Rey
maybe the most
Mysterio
shocking
was
thing.
in this movie.
Unmasked Rey Mysterio, yeah. So you have all of that. Jimmy King, apparently not the best or most loved wrestler behind the scenes. So that's
See, it's funny because that was the most realistic part of this movie, where if you look throughout history, the top babyface has always kind of been a piece of crap behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
Jimmy King just felt it fit in perfectly there.
Yeah, Jimmy King very much kind of filling like almost like the Hulk Hogan role of someone who is like the big money maker for a company, but like, a lot of opinions from wrestlers is like they're not, they're a showman, but they're not actually a very talented wrestler when it comes to in-ring work.
Exactly. So that leads to Tom Sinclair to kind of do like a Montreal screw job. For those who don't know, in Survivor Series in the WWF, Bret the Hitman Hart, I think a lot of people obviously know him, even if you're not a wrestling fan. He wasn't sure if he was going to stay or leave the World Wrestling Federation. So in a match that's technically choreographed, predetermined, they actually took the championship away from him between the referee, the other wrestler was in it. So in this movie, we kind of see some of that, where Diamond Dallas Page, which a lot of people may know from DDPY and all of that awesome stuff, he's sort of the bad guy, but he's really the gatekeeper of this movie, right? He kind of like, he's like the glue between the non-wrestler and the wrestler roles.
He's a heel.
Yeah, he is amazing. But he becomes the champion. They like literally throw him through a table. Even the people that supported Jimmy King turn on him, and then he's gone. He's kicked out, and then that's when we see that he's actually not a great human being. He's flat out broke. But then there's these two wrestling fans, which are Scott Conn and David Arquette. And David's character, Gordie, he believes wrestling's not fake, as he famously says in the movie, and it becomes the ultimate journey of these two lifelong wrestling fans to really just get this guy back. But that's not the actual story, people. The actual story about this movie is David Arquette. Can one of you describe, both of you maybe didn't watch a lot of this, but I would love to get Ryan's perspective as somebody that didn't watch WCW, but you definitely heard about David Arquette actually becoming the world heavyweight champion, and to this day it's still a relevant topic because like David Arquette's wrestling in 2020, right? He's fully active wrestling in the independent scene.
If you want to talk about good wrestling movies, go look up the trailer for You Can't Kill David Arquette.
I'm going to watch that this week.
It looks phenomenal.
Yeah. It's a great documentary, apparently. But Ryan, what's your take as an outsider watching this and knowing everything that unfolded after the movie with David Arquette?
Well, I didn't know when I saw the movie at the time that they, did the cross promotion of actually having David Arquette show up and actually win the championship in actual WCW. But all the stories, it's just very infamous and like a terrible decision, and you just hear about how it just ruined WCW. But WCW was already doing dumb stuff. I mean, Jay Leno was putting Hulk Hogan in a wrist lock, and Hogan's like acting like it's actually hurting him. So things like that were already happening. And it was just another ridiculous thing that WCW did. But now I feel like David Arquette is almost going above and beyond to like make up for it by basically murdering himself on the road in the independents, like, with like light tubes and like all this other stuff. He's all these other weapons that he's just like killing himself over. I don't think he has to go that far. He already, I think he's already gained a lot of respect from wrestling fans. And, it wasn't his decision to win that title. So I don't
Apparently
think the fans...
that idea, for those curious, did not even come from David Arquette. David Arquette has historically said he was completely against it. It wasn't even an Eric Bischoff idea. The person that suggested it was one of the announcers, Tony Schiavone. Which is very interesting because you would think that. So let's consider this. Let's consider this. You're spending over $24 million in a movie, and you're making a huge decision in the actual show. You're changing the landscape of the actual show. Here's the thing that people forget. Like, Ryan, say you're a marketing expert, or Keith. If you were to make David Arquette the champion, you would maybe make him champion before or during the movie's release, right? Like right around that time, right?
Yeah, it's like a pre-promo thing.
Exactly. So this happened about a month after. So in hindsight...
So they had flopped by that point. And
so the movie had already been out. I believe it was 3 weeks in the movie theaters. And, I mean, look at the numbers. It was already just not doing great.
They were probably trying to do it
to do this.
Maybe, they did it as a way to try and boost interest in the movie because it was doing bad.
And they killed the whole company, Ryan. They killed the whole company.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they talked about that decision.
I was trying to rationalize why they might have did it, not that it was a good idea.
Yeah, so, and for those that don't know, because once again, like, we'll be going back to the movie, but just so you understand how ridiculous everything around the movie is, when David Arquette won the championship, you would think that it would be one-on-one, and one person beats the other. He won the championship in a tag team match in WCW Thunder, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Because I was watching live, and I was just like, hey, this don't make sense, man. I'm a kid, like, I don't book wrestling, but what would you, like...
Because that's how insane WCW was at the time. It's like, well, we can't have David Arquette pin one of our wrestlers because that doesn't make any sense, but he can pin somebody in a tag match where there's real wrestlers because that makes sense. Yeah, let's book it.
They were trying to get the best of both worlds with a publicity stunt while still trying to make no one on their roster look bad by directly losing to David Arquette. So you do it in a tag match. You can understand the rationale, but obviously we all know with the lovely ability of hindsight to see that this was all a terrible decision.
I don't even think you need hindsight for that, Ryan. Unless you consider hindsight like 3 seconds after it happened.
Like they just did cuts like, ooh, this is a bad idea, but let's keep going. So we have all of that, right? So let's sort of go back. There's two types of stories in the film, which one is, we mentioned, it's Jimmy King, and it's his quest to come back to the movie, to come back to WCW. And then there's these two wrestling fans, which I don't understand. I mean, Keith talked about like toilet humor. The two characters flat out work in a sewage company, right? So it's like they went all out there. It is nothing but feces jokes from the very beginning to the point like David Arquette's character shoves his finger up his ass to get some free icy. So it's like, I don't know at what point there wasn't a producer going like, hey, I get it, toilet humor. Can you scale it back? Because I don't think, and even as a wrestling fan, like what I love about this film is not the actual movie. It's the whole concept. Like I got to see Goldberg on the big screen. I got to see Booker T get a shining light there. I got to see Rey Mysterio pull off a Hurricane Rana. And it's these characters that I've grown up with. But the actual film, it almost felt like it was mocking wrestling, even though like you could point where they were trying to kind of emphasize that it is real, I thought that they did so little that I don't think anything positive came out of it. What do you guys think about that?
I agree 100%. It felt like, depending on what scene you were watching in the movie, they were trying to get the best of both worlds, where they wanted to do this like peek behind the curtain at wrestling and show you what it's actually like, but then 3 seconds later there's a guy in a porta potty getting a air vacuum shoved into it and toilet paper blowing around everywhere. Or okay, now we're talking about like the serious repercussions of what can happen in a ring, and then a truck full of toilet paper hits a truck full of poop just because that needed to be in the movie. So it's for everything that they did, that because I think there is some good stuff in that movie, and I'm not trying to sit here and say that this should be like a serious look at wrestling movie, but the humor that they went with, kind of every time they took a step forward, that humor being there took it about 2 steps back. Because even in the same movie where they're trying to show how choreographed wrestling is, they bring in like the Stu Hart characters, like, oh, I'll twist you 10 ways from Sunday and show you real wrestling. Well, if you're doing this look into it, then why is that there as well? You're making it real with these real life stakes, but you're also showing it's choreographed. It tried to do a little bit of everything and ended up not landing anything at the same time.
Well, I would argue that I think it actually did a good job of painting that line. Yes, there's a lot of toilet humor. It's a 2000s comedy, and it's a teen comedy is what it is, right? It's gonna have stupid jokes like that, just like American Pie and anything else. It's of its era, very, very much so. Like, in every sense of the word, it is of its era. But I think it did a good job of establishing that in the early part of the movie, with that first Nitro that they're at, you can tell that it is a choreographed show. But because when that turning point of, things like they're, to use wrestling terminology, when they start shooting on each other and actually physically harming each other, that's when it turned real. And it was like established, I think, pretty well that Jimmy King is going to have to actually fight for real in this match if he wants to win his way back to the WCW. So I think the show portion of, like, they established that, okay, it normally is a show, but that's part of why he was so intimidated, is because he knew he had to fight for real in this situation to actually be able to kind of win back.
And I think that's the part of the film that I did think was very cool, which is it does poke a lot of fun at wrestling, but if there's one part it got right, and let's not forget, I mean, both of you brought up 2000s toilet humor. In 2000s wrestling, this whole concept of wrestlers sort of going in for themselves was very common, which is,
especially in WCW.
Yeah, exactly. Say I was a wrestler that I was going to be losing a match. Maybe I didn't want to lose the match, so I would make the other opponent look bad, even though my job is to make the other person look good, right? So the whole concept in this thing is that even though they present it as choreographed, that even the Jimmy King character says it, the way they portray the DDP versus Jimmy King story, it's like they legitimately hate each other, and they're doing a full-blown match, right? And I thought that was very interesting. What did you guys think about the actual story of Jimmy King? So they strip him away. He goes to a trailer park, very similar to the wrestler. I think this part, one is drama, one is comedy, but there's a lot of similarities that I have no doubt.
There's a lot of overlap.
There is. Shockingly so.
So what did you guys think about that story of Jimmy King, the non-wrestler part of the story?
Well, I liked it. I do want to touch back on the match part one more time, just because if you think of it, right, if you have a movie about professional wrestling, how can you add drama to a match without either A, making it real, making it a shoot fight, if you will, or or pretending the entire time that wrestling is real. Because otherwise, if you're getting that peek backstage, it would just be, oh, hey, Jimmy King, you're going over DDP. So, and then you just watch the match play out. So to add drama there, the wrestler did it in different ways where it's more about, the health of like the condition that, Randy the Ram was in, more so than like what actually happens in a match. Where in this movie, if you want to have drama behind a match, you can only do so many things when it's established that it's predetermined. So I think it was a cool decision to first acknowledge that, wrestling's a show, but then make this like, but this one match, this is a fight for real. So I think, like, if you think about it, like, there's only so many ways you can do it if you want to have that drama. But in terms of Jimmy King himself, like, it definitely, rings true. Like, if you're a wrestling fan, that, like, it's not, for a lot of these wrestlers, it's not this glamorous lifestyle that's going on behind it. Not everything like a Ric Flair would portray. And, just to show that, like, while someone who when the show's on, they seem like this amazing person, but then you kind of see like, oh, never meet your heroes type of situation where, he's just kind of this scumbag and he only cares about money. And there's a lot of wrestlers like that, when they just say, oh, they want to talk to him for 5 minutes, and he's like, how much money you got? Like, that's a very, like,
and
wrestler
then he just yells
thing,
appearance fee, and
exactly.
Then it's all good.
Like, that's, like, everyone's met those wrestlers that, like, oh, they're your hero, but it's like, they're like, oh, hey, kid, $10, like, if you want to say hi to me. So I think we've all kind of been there when it comes to wrestlers. So there's a lot of that rings true. If you're like, there's a lot to appreciate if you're a wrestling fan in this movie. If you don't care about wrestling, this movie is probably not worth your time. But like, for wrestling fans, there's a lot of little things to love.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that one of the positive things in that whole concept of we get to see Jimmy King, who he really is, then you have the Gordie and Sean characters try to sort of infiltrate, which I love that in the film, and this is not even like a 2000s thing. This is like a 95 thing. I went back to like The Hacker. They bump into this kid as they're traveling named Isaac, who goes to this website. Literally, it just like flat out says, like, what was it?
Hackers Planet or something?
Hacker Planet. That's
Hackers Planet, I think it was. Let me actually put it up
like
here
a crappy
like
early
iMac
2000s children's toy computer.
Yeah, so he goes into Hackers Planet, and he's got like the braces. I mean, damn, people, you cannot.
That guy actually was in American Pie, by the way.
Yeah. So they fully brought him in over here. So they, hey, whatever you did over there, just do that here. And then he is the one that's sort of exploring and figuring out where Jimmy King is. They're kind of like in denial, right? Because it's like, hey, he hasn't paid child support. His family hates him. Jimmy King came out with an autobiography, and I guarantee you, like, a lot of this is based on real events in wrestling, like an autobiography that's totally not real, but I mean, it's what he wrote.
The more I think about the
unquote.
Jimmy King character, it makes me think of a certain brother.
Oh, yeah. No, it is definitely, I mean, and keep in mind, this is WCW producing this film. There's probably a lot of, like, bad blood with Hulk Hogan.
And for context,
for
context, I was going to bring this up at the end, but just because what you're bringing up is not too far from the truth. So Todd St. Clair in this movie is maybe the character that makes the least amount of sense because it's clearly supposed to be Eric Bischoff. For those who don't know, if in WWF you had Vince McMahon, in the WCW you had Eric Bischoff. Apparently, Eric Bischoff was the person that began this entire project, the entire experience, but he was fired just months before this movie began being filmed. So he's gone on record saying that the movie he was actually trying to make was very different than the movie that ended up being released. Let's not forget, Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan were very tight, were very close. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing a character like Jimmy King. And, Hulk Hogan was almost like the king of wrestling, right? And in many respects, like one of the most iconic characters. And then you're seeing a lot of similarities in how people don't like him It's 2000, the year 2000, right? Bad blood all over the place. And Todd St. Clair there. Having that context as wrestling fans, because for everybody else, it's like not even worth a damn. Do you think it brings like another unique element to this movie?
I mean, it just, as a wrestling fan, it amplifies the WCW-ness of it all, because...
We'll sabotage our own movie.
Exactly, like around this time, that's what was happening on WCW programming. You had, when Bischoff and Hogan got quote-unquote fired, you had Vince Russo going on television talking about how awful they were. They were sabotaging their own product with just like one night deciding we're resetting all the champions, none of it matters anymore, and doing a bunch of decisions like that. So it makes it the perfect WCW movie by doing that.
For those that think Keith is lying, they actually did that. They actually reset the champions, and they openly went out there and agreed that what they were doing was bad on live television. I was there as a child. I thought wrestling was still kind of real at that point. Guess what? Vince Russo was my Santa Claus revelation. I'm like, wait, when you're wait, are you implying? Oh my goodness! It's choreographed there.
There's a lot of, now I don't know this one way or another for sure, but there's a lot of this movie that feels like Vince Russo had his hands in it.
I don't know for sure. There's not a lot of information about that.
Match, so.
Yeah, that's the only thing this was missing. Just
yeah. Now, I will say the one part of the movie that I'm like, man, you had something there. There's a couple of like nuggets of just like potential. And one of the parts of the film where they are in the trailer inside the Jimmy King's trailer talking with him, like he just flat out tells Gordie and Sean, hey, wrestling's fake, but one of them says, how can you be phony if I believe in you? So they actually did a good job of justifying, like, this dude's an asshole. He abandoned his family, but they didn't believe in, maybe like, I forget what the character's real name was supposed to be. I don't know if they said it a lot, but like they believed in Jimmy King, right? They believed in the character that they saw, and they wanted to see that person and the real asshole, the real life asshole, sort of become intertwined. And that's kind of the motivation of the film, right? Let's get him back up. So they naturally, with no effort whatsoever, infiltrate WCW facilities on live television with like literally like the portable toilets, the porta potties, and during a live filming session, you have three men not contractually hired by the company assault the individuals, and that lends them a spot on a pay-per-view. What?
Like,
see,
that
is the biggest leap in this movie, I will say.
That's the part, like, I don't mean to, like, discredit what you were saying earlier, Ryan, about how they did a good job blurring the line between what's the show and what's actual somebody fighting for his life, because that middle part is what really killed it for me, where, hey, these guys are going on live television on a live episode of Nitro, and they're not immediately getting taken down by security and arrested.
That is the biggest, I think, like plot hole in the movie. And again, it's a movie of its time. It's not meant to be taken seriously, so you really have to, this is probably the biggest area you have to suspend your disbelief.
Like, imagine if two dudes tackled Vince McMahon on live television. Like, they would be killed on the
I think that's what they were going for. They were going for like a, you know, once again, like, I was a WCW fan growing up. So to me, that was like, oh man, wouldn't it be awesome if I was in that? I could just like go in there, insert myself into a storyline.
But, and see, I think that's part of it, is like you can put yourself in the shoes of like the two characters, like Gordie and Sean, and like it's kind of like the wrestling fans kind of fantasy basically being played out. But yeah, this is the area where it's like the most hurdles have to be jumped, right? Like, okay, so I guess you would assume because they're in the poop industry that they get some connections that they can like have these porta potties. But why do they have porta potties at a stadium? Don't they have all these bathrooms at stadiums? I don't even understand why the porta potties are even necessary.
When you gotta go, brother.
Yeah, somehow they're getting clearance to be in this building, and then, when they show up on live TV, maybe they'd keep Jimmy King on camera, but the two fans, security would immediately escort them, and they would not just let them continuously assault Sinclair. Like, it was completely ridiculous, but again, it's not a movie that should be nitpicked like that, because it's it's a stupid fun movie. But if you're gonna pick an area where it's like the biggest kind of leap of like reality, then that would be that scene in particular, and the fact that they just go along with it and they make that match. That's just never ever gonna happen. They're gonna cut the camera to commercial and you would never see any of that.
So now the big emphasis of the film is, hey, they have this pay-per-view match, right? But Jimmy King's out of shape. He's not a great wrestler. So there's two things that happen, which is number one, he tries to go get some training with Simon Deeney, Winter Wrestle, which, as Keith mentioned, that character is just not even based. I want to say it's like they just like flat out ripped off the personality of one Stu Hart, which for those that don't know, Stu Hart is part of the incredibly well-known Hart family, and he's always been known as like this, hey, like no nonsense, like if I'm going to train you, I'm going to damn near break your arm, but hey, WCW, they got a DDP. I mean, when you got Disco Inferno in that company and all that, you got to get some backup. Like, not everybody can take down Disco Inferno, right? So what they do, and even though Disco Inferno was a good guy at the end, which like totally just... He cannot be a babyface, but that's another story.
You're obsessed with Disco Inferno.
Yeah, leave me alone there. So,
let's just say the words Glenn Gilberti and move on.
Exactly. Let's say that. So Jimmy King also tries to develop this entourage of just like, what is like the fireman? I'm gonna hose you. What do you guys think about this whole like? This is like the Fast and the Furious Ocean's 11 moment of we got to recruit some people for this team, which, I mean, Mission Impossible.
They're completely insignificant and get like zero screen time anyway.
Yeah,
so
but they dedicate time to this, which
it
just got completely cut. I thought this part was pretty fun. I think this is where it's like, hey, this is what I remember enjoying about the film, for better or worse. Okay, let's be real here.
It is a good moment in the film where there's a lot of like, it's a time when it was funny, the fun that they were poking at wrestling fans.
Do you guys think Mean Gene is sexy?
Always.
That's a moment where, first of all, I kind of cringed when that happened. R.I.P. Mean Gene, we love you. But like, that's a thing where it's like, oh, it's funny to wrestling fans, but anyone who's not a wrestling fan and doesn't like know Mean Gene, it's not like, it's just a complete miss. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny because you're like, oh, look at Mean Gene saying that silly thing, you know?
Yeah, there's a few people that just felt out of place in that movie, and Mean Gene is number one on that list with a bullet, where much like a lot of things going on in WCW at that time, you had to wonder if like people were just looking at that script and thinking to themselves like, what the hell are we doing? Why is this happening? And I feel like Mean Gene could have been one of those people.
It could have. I think another unfortunate part is like for any wrestling fan that watched wrestling in the 90s, a lot of these wrestlers have died, and watching these films, it's getting kind of painful. And like, you know, in one shot you have Bam Bam Bigelow and Mean Gene. In like one shot, I'm like, oof, man, this is not aged gracefully. You have like Perry Saturn that I believe is still alive, but he's in really, really rough shape, right? I mean, people presumed he was dead for like 5 years because you cannot find him. So watching this movie now is like, oh man, this movie takes a different tone the more time goes by, right? I mean, that's it.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. Yes, it does.
Just a dramatic tone shift. I mean, Ryan's like, man, this is way too serious for me now.
Yeah,
you did not expect that shift.
It got real.
Yeah. So the other part of the film is. And I like this part because I think it's the more relatable part, is Ryan still just trying to process all of this information. So Gordie in one side, you know, the character played by David Arquette, he's trying to just motivate Jimmy King. So that's happening, but it's almost like he's trying to live his own dream of becoming a wrestler. His parents are like deputies or sheriffs, I forget. I always get those mixed up.
There's state police.
Yeah, let's just say
on the vehicle.
Neither one of the other two. So
yeah, his family are cops, and obviously they want him to be a cop. But it's like so ridiculous that they're never not in uniform. Like
they're
you
living their
never
gimmick, man.
Yeah, you never see his dad not in uniform. They're all at the dinner table, like completely in uniform,
just shooting a fridge because he's mad.
Yeah, it's like it is the most just like bare bones basic, like, oh, we are all cops, you must be a cop, why aren't you being a cop?
Yep.
Like that's pretty much it.
There's a part of the movie that I have not introduced, but I'm not only going to introduce it. I'm just going to lay the groundwork, and I need to get your reactions. There were two parts of this film.
I think I'm ready for this.
Yeah, there's two parts in this film that I'm like, knowing you two, I'm like, man, this is when you two really hate me. Like, I even wrote it in the agenda. This is when Keith really hates me having him watch this movie. So in the movie, Todd St. Clair finds out that Jimmy King is actually getting some training by Sam Dini, and he's getting this entourage. So there's a chance that not only does he become a champion.
Every time you say that, I think you're saying Simon Dini, like the fitness.
Simon Dini, man, I'm gonna go with it. I love me some Simon Dean. So as that is happening, he decides to have one of the Nitro girls, which is like in the actual Nitro show, they would have all of these scantily clad females, right now wearing a lot of clothing, just dance between commercial breaks as a way to keep the audience interested. So there's one of them called Sasha, which is played by Rose McGowan. One of the weirdest casting choices, because I don't think that she and this movie blended in any way at all. But then there's like this kind of love story, which in one part of the film leads us to a date in her apartment with a lot of questionable moments. But instead of just like, Keith, can you describe what are some of the events that happen in that apartment and how lovely Gordie gets his just like charisma on?
Well, they decide to, what was her character's name again? The female?
Sasha.
Sorry. Sasha uses a poor choice of words and asks to see some of his moves, some of his holds in the bedroom. And when you think they're going to get all sexy and, show those moves, he instead pulls out like a front headlock takedown. Snapmare.
Okay, Juan loved this scene because he did a snapmare, all right?
Yes, also that. But it's just
Don't
like...
even lie, Juan.
Yep.
You know it's true.
Yep.
But it just shows like that is the tone of this movie just crystallized in its purest form, where it's just like dumb humor, where it's like, oh yeah, I'll show you my moves. Here, I'm gonna throw a working punch at you and actually hit you because you're showing your foreign objects.
We gotta talk about that part. So they actually go to the bedroom. And she takes off her top, revealing some things. I mean, not for us, but for him.
Some foreign objects.
What does Gordie actually say here?
He yells the words
foreign objects.
Foreign objects.
And proceeds to
punch her clean in the face.
Just like, what?
There's so much of that. Like, why? Number one, why is that your reaction? Number two, why are those foreign objects? Number three, just why? Why? WHY with a bullet. Why?
Look, I think it's safe to say that the female characters in this story were just slightly underwritten,
Just
like,
a little bit.
Slightly.
They were, like, I feel like, growing up you hear, like, oh, women are portrayed as sex objects and things like that. But sometimes it doesn't always, like, click just, growing up as, a guy and watching shows and stuff. But when you watch this movie, you're like, I kind of see it here, where it's like, she just kind of goes up to Gordie and they have like a date and then they're banging immediately. Granted, there was an ulterior motive in that case. But in the case of Sean with the girl at the taco restaurant, subtleties there. But it's just literally here's a New York Hard Rock Cafe shirt, and then she just bangs him immediately. You know what I mean? It's like, wow,
yeah.
Like that. It's like, and that was one. They developed the relationship with those two girls with Sean in one scene, and like that's it. you know, and then they immediately go to banging in a van. So
that describes this movie excellently.
Yeah, that's like that's the 2000s.
It's
I think we've come a long way.
There's a theme that everything awful in this movie happens in a van, because we didn't really talk about it because it is a very like quick point in the movie, but when there's a scene in the movie where they're trying to hitchhike to get to Atlanta, and then they're picked up by a group of traveling nuns, and then, you know, they're kind of passing the time, and then they turn like songs of Kumbaya into Running with the Devil, just because, you know, it's the nuns and there's a bunch of devils, and then they're making fart jokes about the nuns. Like, that was a point in the movie where I'm like, what the hell are we doing, guys? Why are we here? It was that and the poop truck scene, the poop truck and the toilet paper.
I will say I love that moment. As stupid as the farting nuns joke is, I do love that moment where he's like, I'm gonna ask you a serious question, I need a serious answer. Did you fart in that van? Like, I don't care how toilet humor that joke is. That I think that moment was funny.
That moment was funny, but I'm actually going to bring up one of my jokes. I have a YouTube channel in which I often ask in 2020. So I got to ask this here. Would this movie be able to be made in 2020? I just don't see how that would be.
There's a 0% chance that this would be made. Well, if you took the jokes from this movie, like if you tried to release this movie in 2020, there's no way, because there is some very questionable language. But if you made something like it in 2020, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think... It just wouldn't. It would be a very different movie. This movie wouldn't. It would no. It's just a no. Like, I mean, we're getting wrestling related movies. Like I said, maybe we should watch Fighting with My Family. I don't know. Have either of you guys seen it?
It's a really good movie. I really enjoyed it.
So
I've not watched it.
I mean, there's definitely an interest for wrestling related movies, but this movie again is really in that it's not as raunchy as like American Pie, but it's like in the same vein, you know. Yeah,
and I think the fact of the matter is that there's a reason that even though there's not like a whole lot of movies about wrestling, I would actually say, especially for the people that hate wrestling, it's kind of fascinating to take a look at the behind the scenes aspect of it. Like, a lot of this movie, even though it's corny, it's like kind of cheesy, it's very real. Like, for all of us that have watched wrestling for pretty much all our lives, and we've seen and heard stories, so much of what happens in this movie is strikingly real, right? From the fans, like, I mean, you talk about something like Mikey Whipwreck, right? In ECW, he was a wrestling fan. He started setting up the rings, became a wrestler, and then did a whole lot of stuff. It's like, it's not unprecedented to have just like a random wrestling fan kind of get involved, gets an opportunity, and then proceeds to actually become part of this whole process, right? So I think that's pretty good. And then eventually in the movie, you know, we do get to some more action. This movie concludes with a triple cage match that actually ended up happening in real WCW with David Arquette and Jeff Jarrett. So, I mean, like, hey, you can't have it all, right? But, I mean, David Arquette was there, and he turned heel. He became a bad guy, people, because, of course, that's what happens around that point. But what do you guys think about the whole process of... Because it's a movie, they can get away with even more stuff than real quote-unquote wrestling can, because it's like an hour 20. You know, it's a very short movie, all things considered. What do you think about the craziness that unfolded, which concluded in a triple cage match featuring Diamond Dallas Page, Demi King, David Arquette, everybody, the whole freaking roster comes out at one point.
What was Sasha doing inside the cage?
Who knows?
When she got hit by a ladder. Like, that didn't make any sense.
Like, if you had a dial of how much WCW-ness you were willing to put into something, like, this match would take that dial and turn it all the way to the top and just turn it a little more. Like, this was like the fantasy of what WCW wanted to be, with run-ins and motorcycles jumping off triple cages, and here's these insane matches. In real life, we can only put things on a pole, but this time in a movie, we can hang things from 3 cages, because why not? It was the ultimate WCW fantasy.
And I think there's 2 parts of this movie that I want to bring up now. One of them happens during this scene, but the other one that we haven't even brought up, and it kind of upsets me considering he's no longer with us, that we didn't get to see more, which is Macho Man Randy Savage. I thought his involvement in the movie was very weird because he's only basically at the opening scene, which is a dream sequence even, so it's not like actually happening, quote unquote. But knowing the potential, it's like, look, of all the freaking wrestlers, I mean, we got Bonesaw and Spider-Man, so there's a little bit of redemption. But damn it, like, this is the guy you wanted to highlight. So maybe he just didn't want to have like a bigger role in the film. But what do you think about this?
That is like, that answer lies in the credits of this movie. Where did you guys stick around for the credits and see like the blooper reel?
Oliver Platt nailed him,
and he punches Macho Man in the face. I imagine that's where his involvement in the movie ended.
He's like, Bonesaw's not ready.
Yeah, Bonesaw is gonna kick your bum.
Ryan, Macho Man, anything?
No, I think you guys kind of covered it on that one.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then the other thing, the other wrestler that almost got like even less airtime is Sting, which, can I just point out, like, how badass super real. Sting looked like a freaking badass in this movie. I'm like,
he
holy
was
crap.
super cool. They kind of just brought him in at the end, like when Sinclair's talking to him in that room, and it's like we kind of saw Goldberg a little bit throughout the movie, but they just kind of bring Sting in at the end. But they did do Sting justice, I will say, and I love that when he gets involved, they actually play like his theme in the background.
That was pretty cool.
That was probably the best part of the whole movie.
Mm-hmm. At least that Sting character had some moment in that movie, because the real life version just wasn't that.
This is a part of the movie that I really do think, and it's so sad, there's a completely different version of it. Like, if we talk about the Snyder Cut of Justice League, knowing what happened with Eric Bischoff and everything.
Tell me about the Snyder Cut of Ready to Rumble.
There's the Bischoff cut, man. There's a Bischoff cut of this.
Well, there's a Bischoff, like, probably a Bischoff outline or a script, maybe?
Yeah. Like a Bischoff's.
How has he not covered that on his podcast?
I don't know if I listen to 83 Weeks a lot, so if anybody wants to learn about WCW, there's that. But I do think it is interesting that certain characters are there very little, and I think that Sting, I get it. He shows up at the end, and it's like super cool, and we get a lot of fairly decent action, but I just wanted to see a lot more of that. But at the same time, I would have tarnished this, but at the same time, the company died a year later, so not like it really mattered, right?
It's true. And I think that's a situation where not having more is a good thing, because you mentioned how Goldberg is in a few scenes in the movie. I think it really showed that Goldberg's acting ability wasn't exactly up to par with everyone else.
But he was so happy with Jimmy King winning at the end. He's like, come on. And he's always got to move his hands. He's got to talk with his hands like, come on.
And then they give him, like, even though he was like a human killing machine at that point, they give him the most unflattering camera angle of just looking directly down at him, looking straight up. And it just, like, you even made Goldberg look bad somehow.
I also like how he goes into the convenience store in his underwear.
Right. I love the fact that the movie ends in this like super badass scenario where, hey, Jimmy King wins, he becomes the champion. Apparently, it's like, hey, he rights all the wrongs. He gets his kid some braces because holy crap, those braces were painful. He's got his parents in there, and the movie concludes with like the king and his entourage. Right? It's just like going back to the convenience store at the beginning of the movie where the clerk was talking about wrestling being fake and all that. So everybody else is like, fairly well clothed. No, here's Goldberg just in his underwear. And then the movie ends. That's kind of it.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it established that wrestlers always wear their gear in that movie? Like when Sid and Perry Saturn attacked not Stu Hart, weren't they in their full gear at the same time?
No, they were weren't they in like jeans? They were in like black clothing.
Oh, okay.
I don't think they were full gear.
Also,
no,
poor
maybe
Sid.
Goldberg's just like Randy Orton and he can't wear pants.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
It's
If somebody
impossible.
got the short straw in this movie, it's Sid. Because this is a guy that like wrestled Hulk Hogan a few years ago and Shawn Michaels, and he's just a goon.
Yeah, there's like a really weird scene in this movie where they have like a stealth mission of them trying to take down Simon Dini, and and you have like these two huge dudes getting their asses kicked by him. And then it's like, boom, one chair shot. The old man's in the hospital. Everybody's just like laughing about it. I will say, like, the cool, just like satisfying end is that, you know, Gordie's dad wants him to become a police officer. So he like kind of goes away, tries to take the test, but then like actually invades the wrestling match, you know, tearing through the ring, through the
And
cage.
his dad's just instantly cool with it.
Yeah, his dad's like, hey, he's like speared the dude. I mean, hey, he freaking came out with pyro and shit. It's like, I love my son if I had one, and he did all of that, right? That's pretty amazing.
And that was a hell of a driving the motorcycle off the ramp through through the cage door and landing in the ring, not killing anyone, like in the process.
It's
I mean,
impressive.
that takes a lot of skill.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, having said all of this, what is your takeaway? If you were to, we've dissected the movie fairly decently, all things considered. This train wreck of a movie was. What is like your takeaway? You know, we talk about the legacies. There ain't no damn legacy in this movie, so we ain't gonna be doing that bull crap here.
Yes,
If there's anything you take away, what is it?
my one takeaway from this movie, all jokes
It's the
aside,
arcade game.
to give like, yeah, exactly, the Jimmy King arcade game. I wish it came out. My one honest take that I will look into this camera and say, with like all prejudice, all jokes aside, I hope you enjoyed your birthday present, Juan.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you. I did. It's like the 10th time I've watched this movie, which says a lot about me, but
That
it
is my
what it
only
is.
takeaway.
Hey, I've seen it a lot of times too, Juan, so don't feel bad. I will say this movie, like I said before, if you're a wrestling fan, I truly believe that this movie is worth watching. Is it the best movie in the world? No. Is it the best movie about wrestling? No, but it was for quite a while.
Yeah.
Until The Wrestler came out. This, in my opinion, was the best
Fictional,
movie about
yes,
wrestling.
because like,
Yes, yeah, we're not talking about documentaries or anything
let's talk
like
about
that.
Beyond the Mat and stuff like that.
No.
Yeah.
This was the best feature film about wrestling until The Wrestler, and now with Fighting With My Family, there's more than one movie that's better than this. Truth is, there's just not a lot of those options out there. But like I said, if you're a wrestling fan, especially if you're nostalgic for like the Attitude Era / Monday Night Wars era, then this is kind of a nice little trip down memory lane, particularly if you watch WCW or if you have an interest in WCW. I think there is some nice little tidbits to get out of this, and it's as bad as some of the jokes are. I think it's still a pretty watchable movie. It's just not the best, but it has its moments, and if you're a wrestling fan, I think there's actually a decent amount of things to appreciate.
No, without question. And I mentioned that one of the most intriguing things about this movie is like all the behind the scenes and curious facts about it. So let's actually get to that. So credit to whatculture.com for 8 things you didn't know about Ready to Rumble. Are you guys ready? Because like some of these you have actually not known about.
I'm
right?
happy, or I'm excited to learn some things about Ready to Rumble.
And these are actually pretty cool. So number 8 is stunt doubles. Do you know who was the stunt double for one Jimmy King? Do you know? It's not for points, but
I imagine it was a wrestler because
Yes.
they had a entire roster of potential
So who
stunt
has a
doubles.
similar body type to Oliver
you're going to get it
Platt?
way wrong if you go by that. It's actually Canyon.
I was
What?
actually about to say Canyon because I was going by the hair, like the dark hair. Huh.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So Canyon was actually apparently the choreographer for a lot of the fight stuff in the movie. Canyon was a wrestler that, much like other ones, unfortunately, what?
Oh my God, I'm done with this episode. All right.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, who better for that, right? He's like Canyon is actually one of the best wrestlers, like underrated wrestlers. I love watching him as Mortis and Canyon and all that. Unfortunately, no longer with us, but I mean, hey, like he actually got some positive things about this movie
right now, Ryan. I'm so
yeah, Keith just
freaking
hates
mad
you.
at you.
All right, keep it rolling, Juan.
Now, with David Arquette, guess that stunt double.
Let's see. Was it Rey Mysterio?
No, because he was in the movie.
Well, couldn't it? It could have been.
It was not somebody actually showcased in the movie, to my knowledge.
Scott Steiner.
No, so
Evan Courageous.
Stand back! There's a sugar Shane coming through.
Oh, I was
could see
close.
that, yeah.
So Shane Helms was the stunt double for him. Now let's go over here. Rey Mysterio. This for wrestling fans, it's like unsurprising. Guess what kind of injury Rey Mysterio sustained while working on this?
Yeah, isn't this isn't this where he developed the knee injury that basically hampered the rest of his career?
Yep.
Yeah.
It actually happened. So that Hurricane Rana spot at the beginning of the one of
Which
the
was
first
pretty cool.
shots.
That was a cool shot.
Awesome shot. Luckily they got it. But yeah, apparently it was a very, very serious knee injury suffered there. And for non-wrestling fans, and why we just kind of almost laugh at this in a way, is because it's become like a running joke. Rey Mysterio has had decades of knee problems, and apparently here, this is when it really, really took off. Because he had some before, but it got really bad there. Keith kind of mentioned one of them, which is Macho Man was legit accidentally punched by Oliver Platt, and we got to see that in the blooper reel at the end. Now, another one is which I mentioned is the film only made half of his budget. The film opened on April 7th, 2000 across a non-inconsiderable 2,585 theaters at number 6 on the top 10 box office charts. That's an average of just around 2,000 per theater, and it's in fact the 43rd worst opening for a saturated film release ever.
Oof.
Ever. Not that year, people.
That's not a good list to be on.
Big oof.
Yeah, that's pretty rough there. And then the other thing here is apparently DDP pitched another ending originally, where at the end of the movie, they kind of sit down and talk about the fact that wrestling is a work. I'm very happy that didn't happen. I don't think this film needed that.
No, I don't think so either.
Going over to number 3. Now, this is the one. This is the one that you didn't even know, Ryan, which is the Doctor of Thugonomics, the leader of the C Nation, as Ryan likes to say. John Cena was actually in the film in one of those scenes where Jimmy King is trying to recruit different wrestlers for his stable, including Goldberg. What's your take on that? In a
That's
WCW
crazy.
film,
John Cena seems to be he has just this random history where he just kind of popped up in these places you had no idea he was there. How didn't he start in the same promotion as Samoa Joe or something? I
think it was UPW.
Yeah, he's always got he's got this interesting history where it's you didn't realize even though he I don't even think was in wrestling that long before he joined with WWE and their developmental, but somehow he just ended up in all these different little areas.
The prototype was everywhere.
So the last two things, just because both are pretty interesting here, is we've kind of brought it up. Number 2, Eric Bischoff was originally going to play himself in the main role. It's pretty obvious watching Ready to Rumble that the character of crooked promoter Titus Sinclair is based on former WCW Vice President Eric Bischoff. In actual fact, Bischoff was due to play that version of himself in the film before he was let go by WCW just a couple of months before filming was due to begin. According to Bischoff, the film was a pet project of his, and the original script was a lot more dramatic. When he was on the outs, Time Warner, who didn't appreciate wrestling for anything other than the strong ratings, decided to get involved and made it a more comedic endeavor and essentially making fun of the wrestling business, which is Very
that
interesting.
actually, it makes a lot of sense. It actually really, like, that makes me understand the tone of this movie more, where it really is a look at what people on the outside think wrestling fans are like. Like, that's a lot of the main characters' motivations and, like, where they fall into that movie. So that, I get that. That comes across quite greatly.
Yeah. I thought the guy who played Sinclair, who was also like Cypher from The Matrix, and we covered that movie. I thought he did a pretty good job though, as like the scummy like GM type character.
I agree.
And then the last thing here, very surprising, a sequel was planned but never made it, and it will never be aired on the WWE network. As amazing as it seems, considering how poorly it turned out, there were in fact rumors that a Ready to Rumble sequel was going to be made.
Also, Ready to Rumble.
Yeah,
it's just ready to Rumble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although details are sketchy, it appears as though this was a fun production to work on. Listen to the DVD documentary commentary track, which I actually got to listen to that. I forgot there's a commentary track on the DVD with like David Arquette and all that. When the film completely tanked, costing WCW and distributors millions of dollars, any plans for a sequel were shelved. Speaking of Warner Brothers, because they own the rights to the film, Ready to Rumble will never be available to stream on the WWE network unless WWE pays them a hefty figure for the rights, which makes a lot of sense. Like, Warner has historically hated wrestling, which says a lot, like, better or worse, like how many crappy films have come out on Blu-ray in physical format. Like, the only way you can still get a physical copy of this film is like with the crappy original, barely plastic DVD case, right?
I had to rent this movie on YouTube just to watch it, and it felt so wrong. I felt dirty doing it.
Yeah, I was gifted the DVD by my cousin many years ago. Finally dusted it off and watched the movie. But yeah, it's like that plasticky like case you gotta undo. It was coming out pretty early into like when DVDs were becoming a thing.
Yeah. So everybody, that has been our review of Ready to Rumble here on A Cast of the Past. Thank you, Ryan and Keith, for the lovely birthday gift here before my birthday. So next year, my birthday gift is actually going to be, like, we're going to write a hypothetical sequel for Ready to Rumble. Like, we're just going to write it. And then Keith gets to play Jimmy King and Sinclair and Sasha and Salmondini. Or Simon Dini. Ooh, what if we get Simon Dean involved?
Yeah, what's Nova doing these days?
Oh, Dee.
Okay,
all right,
people,
we're done. So your birthday's canceled next year.
If
Congratulations.
you're still here, you can leave that 5-star review. The movie ain't 5 stars, but you know what it is? This podcast, people. Just not this episode. So you can leave that at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Facebook. You can join the Discord and question everything about this episode at acastofthepast.com/Discord. And I feel like it's been a while where instead of me closing this episode and doing like the whole cast, like we'll do that in a second. But Keith, I'm going to put the camera on you for the video version. Give us a positive message.
A positive message is when you wake up tomorrow, no matter what happens, you will have a day that is better than the movie Ready to Rumble.
And that's been it for another exciting episode of A Cast.
To the
past, baby.
Okay,
you broke
guys,
my
so
butterfinger, baby.
I messed up the recording, so we actually just got to record this entire episode again.
Shut your mouth.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Okay, let me start here. What's more fun than a wrestling fan who drives a
Nothing.
pump in a
We're done.
truck?
Goodbye.